Okay.
Okay, great.
It says meeting is now streaming live on Facebook.
All right, it's actually saying that on the thing. Okay, because I can't see anything yet. It's just saying setting up.
On my screen, it says it's streaming live on Facebook. Yeah.
Okay, excellent. So hopefully, okay, so maybe it's streaming live, but I cannot see anything. If you're seeing it on your page, I'm assuming.
It just said it now. It says live on Facebook, so.
Okay, fabulous. So maybe what I'll do is I'll go back to, actually, you know what, I'll check in my phone just to make sure that it is in fact live. Okay. Oh, yes. Oh, there we are. Hey, there we are. Okay, good. Okay, good. So I won't create any feedback. I'm going to go back to the camera. There we are. So, hello, everybody. Good evening, good afternoon. June Allen here from juneallen.net. Live. We are live. We are streaming live from the Art of Greatness. I'm super excited about today's broadcast. Okay. Super excited because we've got Dr. Angelina in the building, and we are talking about, I'm sorry if you're getting sick of me talking about this book, but it's my new friends. We are talking about 100 Great Black Britons, okay? So if you haven't done so already, you need to go make yourself a cup of tea, okay? Go make yourself a cup of tea.
I have some Ribena.
Come back. Get comfortable, or get a drink, get a glass of wine, get a tipple, whatever you have. I'm just going to share this broadcast actually on my main page, okay? Because I'm sure some more people will come over if I do that. So I've just shared it on my other page. Okay, so yeah, get yourself comfortable because we're going to be talking about all the various reasons why this book is amazing and it needs to be in your house. And we're going to be digging out and having a look and exploring some of the badass Black women in this book. Yeah, super excited. So Angelina, welcome to the live stream. This is our first live stream together on the Art of Greatness.
It is, yes.
So yeah, so for those of you that don't know who Angelina is, Angelina, do you want to just introduce yourself?
Okay, I am a historian, heritage consultant, I'm a lecturer, and I'm an author. That's what I do. I work.
Excuse me. You are now a best-selling author.
Yes, best-selling author.
You are now a best-selling author.
Best-selling author. I did write a book. This is my second book, actually. My first book is it? Yes. I'll get my first book if you will bear with me for one moment. I'll get the first book.
Yeah, no, that'd be great. So while we're just waiting for Angelina to come back, if you can share with anybody that you think might be interested in watching this live stream or wants to get some information about all of this stuff that we're going to be talking about tonight, share it with your colleagues, tag your friends, tell them to come get yourself a cup of tea and come and join us. We're going to be here for the next hour or so talking about stuff. So Angelina, your first book.
Okay, so this is my first book. My first book was is called Equiano's Daughter. And if anybody's interested, I have a few copies. So if anybody, maybe we can do a little competition and get people who would like to win a copy of this book. It's essentially, I was commissioned to research the life of Olaudah Equiano's daughter. Her name was Joanna Vassar. And Olaudah Equiano, if you don't know who he was, he's considered the father of Black British civil rights movement. He was enslaved as a child from his home in present-day Nigeria and brought to the Caribbean, where over time he eventually bought his freedom and became a sailor, sailed around the world, ended up back in the UK, in England, and became an abolitionist, a very famous abolitionist who wrote his own narrative called The Interesting Narrative of Olaudah Equiano, or Gustavus Vassar, the African. He had been given the name Gustavus Vassar by his white owner. and he campaigned for the rest of his life for the abolition of slavery and the slave trade. His narrative, his book, was very, very popular. It was published in 1789, and it went into 9 editions within his own lifetime. That's how successful the book was.
Wow.
And he was responsible for, it was self-published, so that all the money that he made from the book went back to him. And when he died, he left £950 to his daughter, his only surviving daughter, Joanna. £950 in today's money is over £100,000. And he left that to her. So she was a very eligible young heiress who eventually married a congregational minister called Henry Bromley. And she actually died, they lived in different parts of England, but she died in Hackney in 1861. And so I wrote a little book about it. It's only a bit thin because unfortunately women's narratives were not as valued back then as men's. So I had to do a lot of imagining what her life could have been like. There was some documentation, but there wasn't anything that actually spoke directly by her herself or spoke exactly about what actually happened to her. But we do have her death certificate. I found her marriage certificate when I went to Devon, and that's also in the book as well. Somewhere here, I'll find it. But anyway, it's a nice little read. Yeah.
Okay.
There's her marriage certificate there. You can't see it there, but I made a copy and I put it in the book. So yeah, so that's my first book, Equiano's Daughter. And then I've
amazing. And did you say you were you'd be happy to give away?
Yeah, I'll be happy to give away
as part of a competition.
As a part of a competition, yeah.
Okay, great. So maybe you could think about a question. Yeah, think about a question for the audience to answer. Okay. And whoever kind of drops the answer, whatever, in the comments or in a DM or something, then you can choose.
Okay.
Send them to. So think about.
Yeah, I've got a couple in my mind already. I've got a couple in my mind.
Okay. Do you want to say it?
No, I'll wait a bit later. No, actually, why not? I've got 2 questions. It's a 2-parter. First part is, when did Olaudah Equiano die? What year did he die? And number 2, what was the political lobby group that he was part of? Those are 2 very easy to find. So A, what year did he die? And B, what was the name of the political lobbying group that he was a part of?
Right, amazing, family. So if you would like a copy of that book, then if you can drop that in the, actually don't drop it in the comments. I would say send a DM, because if you drop it in the comments, somebody's gonna copy it. So I would say drop me a direct message of what you think the answer is. And at the end of the live stream, I will have a look in my DMs and see what the answer is, and then obviously we'll confirm, I'll make sure that you get a copy of Angelina's book. Okay, so let's crack on, Angelina. So I've had the copy of this book, the second book that Angelina has written, 100 Great Black Britons. Okay, you can get copies of it, Amazon. What's the name? Beacon Books. What's the name of the Beacon? Beacon Books.
Love Books. There's quite a few Black independent bookshops that are carrying it. Certainly, if you want to go to a bigger store like Waterstones or Blackwell's, they will have it. But if you can, Pages at Hackney have it. So if you can support smaller independent bookshops, that would be really terrific.
That's kind of why. Yeah, it's important.
Before you go to Amazon, try to support a local bookshop.
Yeah, fantastic. So today, for those of you that have just joined, I am here with Dr. Angelina Osborne, and we are talking about her amazing new book, 100 Great Black Britons. So I have come up with 7 reasons why I love this book, and why it's empowering the community. So we're going to have a chat about that. We're going to talk about the history of it. We're going to talk about some of Angelina's experiences doing the book. So for anybody that's thinking about doing anything like this, and thinking about writing their own book, it's going to be a really interesting conversation for you to hear, what happens and all of that kind of stuff. So the first reason why I love this book is because Angelina's told me before that it was chosen by the public. Now, I love that because it just means when the public's involved, you know it's going to be a hit. You know it's going to be a hit because they're the ones that are making the decisions about who's going in. And I know, Angelina, you said you've had a lot of pushback about
Yes.
thought they should have been in there. You want to tell us a little bit more about that process?
About the process or about the pushback?
Both.
Oh, okay. Well, in terms of the process, this is what happened. So first of all, I should say that 100 Great Black Britons is sort of 17 years in the making. We did have a campaign back in 2003. And the reason we had a campaign in 2003 was because of what happened in 2002. There was a BBC did a huge campaign about who should be voted the greatest Briton of all time. And they devoted a great deal of time and resources on this program. It's actually their flagship program for the BBC in that year, that autumn, I should say. And so they put it to a public vote, and people, obviously, I think about 300,000 people voted, and they were able to put together sort of a list of 100 people. Out of those 100 people, they then were able to whittle it down to like a so-called top 10. So they did a lot of ranking people. And of the top 10 individuals, they commissioned a series, 10 programs, which were aired over a 2-week period. And each program was presented by a celebrity, or a well-known person, let's say a historian or a celebrity, and they argued the case for that individual, why they should be voted as greatest Briton of all time. So the people that were featured in that top 10, the people that you would imagine would be on the list. So they had Winston Churchill, Isambard Kingdom Brunel, they had Elizabeth I, John Lennon, they had quite a few people, Captain Cook, all these people that you would imagine, people that are very familiar, that people are very familiar with in terms of the British historical narrative. What we noticed in that list is that there was only one person of African heritage, not even African heritage. He was Freddie Mercury. Now, Freddie Mercury was born in Zanzibar, and he's of Parsi heritage. But you know, if you see Freddie Mercury, he presents very much as a white person.
Yeah.
Yep. But he was born. If you saw Freddie Mercury's mother, you know his mother looks very Indian. Okay. So, but Freddie Mercury, most people don't know that Freddie Mercury.
I didn't know, actually. Yeah.
So anyway, so we were really concerned at the fact that there was nobody of African heritage. There was nobody of Asian heritage either. And so my colleague, Patrick Vernon, he had sort of got bee in his bonnet about it. And he thought that there should be some kind of intervention, something should be done. And so he had this idea. He said, well, he talked to a few people, and they were able to put together 100 Black people from history and contemporary. And so it was really kind of a response to the fact that the BBC and that people within, the great British public were not able to identify any person of African heritage to put into the list. So that kind of made us think about the fact that history, British history, the way that it's taught, totally excludes the Black British experience. And so we made this list, and it was very much a lot of historical figures, but also people that were contemporary to that period. We put in, Alicia Dixon, and we put in a lot of footballers. We put a lot of historical footballers and a lot of historical people in there, and people like Herman Ousley, Bernie Grant, lots of famous Black people, a lot of singers. Anyway, so the response to the list when we released it in Black History Month, during Black History Month of 2003, was quite overwhelming. We got a lot of press interest. We created a website, and I should also add that. Yeah, I should also add that the whole organization that the campaign was totally Black led. Patrick as a person behind it, and he had 3 of us in the office. It was Patrick, me, and Pamela Ajay, who was our web designer. and it was solely self-financed. Patrick financed it himself. We didn't seek financing from anybody. So it was a total Black-led enterprise. And we got a lot of interest, and a lot of newspapers, even the Daily Mail ran the list and ran the list. So they all did a...
Seriously?
Yeah, the Daily Mail, the Mirror, the Express. It was featured on the BBC, and actually, Patrick announced the winner of the campaign on Channel 4 Live in the lunchtime news, as I recall, back in 2004, and it was Mary Seacole. Mary Seacole, the Jamaican nurse, was voted as the greatest Briton of all time. We also did a lot of people, like a lot of really like her, Oliver Lysite. Oliver Lysite was the founder of the New Testament Church of God. We put him in there. Wilfred White, who was also an opera singer. We did a lot of people. We did Shirley Bassey. We did everybody that people could recognize, and sort of saying what we were actually saying was, we also put Equiano in there, and a lot of John Archer, who was at that time known as the first Black mayor. He was the mayor of Battersea in 1913. So we put a lot of historical figures in there as well. And so we did a really great schools competition around there. We got a lot of entries from schools all around the UK. We actually travelled around England a little bit, and a lot of London schools. And we went, and they wanted to show us their little things that they'd done, their creation of these murals, and some of them did a play, some of them did a quiz show, based on the information, the content in the website. So it was really, really well received. And after we did it, and the website still today is used as a resource by schools. And so Patrick and I continued to work on an enterprise called Every Generation, where we're looking at Black British history, heritage, and culture. And I did it with him for about a couple more years. And then we just unfortunately, we just ran out of money. We couldn't afford to keep going, because again, it was another Black-led enterprise. And we didn't get any funding from anybody, but we got people really used to come to us, like ask us about the Black presence, the African and Caribbean presence in the UK. We were being consulted by institutions like the Imperial War Museum, National Maritime Museum. Different quangos, sort of, what would they say, quasi non-governmental organizations that would, like the museums, libraries and archives, different places. They were asking us, and it was really, for me, it was quite empowering, because, prior to I had done my master's in history, but my own knowledge of Black British history was very, very little, minimal. And so I learned so much working with Patrick. I learned so much about understanding about Black people in Britain, learning that Black people have been in this country since before the Roman period, that they've been a continuous presence. There's been a large communities of Black people continuously in this country since the Tudor period, so since the 16th century, and maybe even before. And certainly there's archaeological evidence to show that there was, in medieval period, there were African people living here. So
this is one of the things that I loved about it, actually, the fact that there were so many of us to look at in Britain, because normally we tend to look at the States. We tend to look in the States for a lot of our history and stuff like that. I mean, yes, we can relate to it because they're Black and stuff like that, but to actually have that link between Britain and what we've achieved, because a lot of time we just hear the negative stuff. Yeah. So this is another one of the reasons why I think that what you're doing is amazing, and why it's been chosen by the British people, because it's a real treasure trove of looking at actually what we have contributed to British history, because we don't always hear it.
No, that's absolutely right, June. That's absolutely right. I mean, the thing is, as you said, the United States have there are similarities in our experience.
Yeah.
the thing that's often frustrating is that, you know, they'll look to the United States because they'll say that the United States had a civil rights movement. Yes, they did, but we had a civil rights movement here as well.
Here.
In 1963, Paul Stevenson in Bristol started the Bristol bus boycott because they wouldn't employ Black and Asian bus drivers or bus conductors. And this was sanctioned by the trade union, their own trade union. They did not want to hire Black people. So Paul Stevenson said, this is absolutely outrageous. We will not use your bus. We will not ride on your buses. And got a lot of support from people like Tony Benn and Harold Wilson back then. And eventually, I think the boycott lasted about 2 or 3, a good part, 3-4 months. And eventually the bus company did capitulate, and they started to employ Indian and Caribbean bus drivers, but they were very blatant in their racism. Definitely there was a color bar. You know, if you called on the phone and said, I want to work at the bus company, if they couldn't recognize in your voice that we had Caribbean accent, they would say yes to you on the phone. And as soon as you came in for the interview, they would say, no, there's no job. So, you know, the civil rights movement in Britain, certainly the bus boycott is certainly one aspect, but there were so many other things that were happening as well in the 60s, in the 50s, 30s, 20s, even before there's been a civil rights movement. The campaign against racial discrimination, which was founded in 1965. And it was because Martin Luther King did come to Britain in late 1964, and he did meet with them.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, he met with them and he told them this is how you could go about it. And they organized themselves into the campaign of racial discrimination. People like Lord Pitt, who was originally from Grenada, but was a political activist here, Dame Jocelyn Barrow, many other people, Professor Gus John, all these people were active in trying to get the first Race Relations Act of 1965 passed. So we have our own civil rights, and then even the Black Power movement, that's also civil rights. That's also a civil rights movement. And that these stories, this history is not part of our narrative is absolutely unacceptable, you know, unacceptable.
Absolutely.
If you cannot give meaning to our presence, okay, if you cannot look at us and say, why, nobody's asking, everybody, why are we here? Why are there Black British people here? Where are African British people here? The reason we're here is because of enslavement and colonialism. Because British history is a global history, okay? And that is why we have the links here. And if you're not making the links here and you're not telling us why we deserve to be here, why our place is here, then they will continuously disenfranchise us. And that's part of the problems that we're facing today.
What's going to make us think that, you know, before I kind of really dug into a lot of the stuff that I'm seeing in the book and just hearing your, you know, the stuff that you've researched and everything, it would be easy to think, well, we haven't contributed anything or anything of any value, in terms of, you know, the civil rights and all the rest of it. It all happened in America and nothing was happening over here. What were we doing over here? Drinking tea and going to work, you know, which clearly there's a lot more that was going on. And this is the reason why doing this is, you know, the reason that you've done this is so important, because I mean, even the richness in all of the stories that you're sharing tonight, I haven't heard a lot of these stories. I didn't know Dr. King came here in the 60s. Yes, he did. Yeah. You know?
He came here. He didn't come here specifically to be here. He was en route to Sweden because he was going to collect his Nobel Peace Prize. And so he made a bit of quick stop. He didn't stay here very long. He stayed here for about maybe 2 or 3 days, not very long. Okay. But in that period, people knew he was coming, and they thought, this is our moment. Let's get him and see if he will talk to us, because he was very aware of what was going on in Britain in terms of the colour bar and discrimination experience, because he would have been very conscious of that, especially in people, you know, in 1958. You had what's called the race riots. They weren't race riots. What they were white people who were angry that Black people were living in their neighborhoods, right? And so they started to roam the streets looking for Black people to attack. Yeah. So race rights is a bit of a misleading term. Black people weren't fighting black people weren't out there fighting white people. They were actually defending themselves against
Defense.
serious attack. Yeah, racist
Yeah.
attacks, because the government wasn't providing any kind of narrative, any kind of positive narrative to explain why Caribbean people were coming over and settling. They were settling because it was their right to do so. The 1948 British Nationality Act gave all British subjects around the Commonwealth, around the British Empire, the right to come here and live here and settle here. What people don't know is that.
I remember mum telling me. I remember my mum telling me about how they would hear things on the radio, you know, telling black people to come to England. So they used to think that, you know, that somehow the streets were paved with gold, and all of these stories. What they remember hearing in the States, making out that they would be welcome and all the rest of it. And when they got here, it was a very different story. Yeah, I remember my dad also saying at one point that the first year that he came, like obviously he didn't know how cold, he didn't really know how cold it was. And he told me that he cried. Yeah. The first winter that he was in the UK, he cried because it was so cold, and he didn't. It was just like not even just the coldness, the temperature, but in terms of the reception that they had from being here and being in a hostile environment and stuff like that. You know, it's just really, you know, that Britain still has about you know, what we were doing here, and you know, making it look like, oh, you know, it wasn't that bad or whatever. But this is why, again, the work that you're doing and, you know, the stories that are in this book are so important. So for those of you that don't know and that just joined, okay, we are talking to Dr. Angelina Osborne, who wrote this amazing book, 100 Great Black Britons, and we're talking about the history, we're talking about why it's important, why it's an important part of our legacy as Black British people. So moving on from you know, why the book is important. Another reason why I love it is because it's just beautifully presented. Yeah, it's hardback. Okay, it's quite a thick book, so if you got that as a gift, it's just really, really nice, and it feels really solid. So it's a great. There aren't that many what's the coffee table books. It's a beautiful coffee table book to have. So exactly, if you haven't got, if you're looking for books, whether you celebrate Kwanzaa, birthdays coming up or anything like, this is an amazing piece of Black British history that you need to be buying. Okay, you need to be buying it. Another reason why I love this book is because you get a great snapshot. Okay, so there's 100 different obviously what you get in the book, okay, is 3 or 4 really solid pages of information of the person. And what I love about how Angelina's written about each person is that you really get a sense of what was going on at the time. You get a sense of the person's values. You get a sense, you know, you get all of the biographical stuff, the dates and the times and who they were and all of that kind of stuff. But I love it because you get a real sense of what was going on for them. And this is, again, another great reason why it was important that the public picked it. Because then all of the little gems that you're sharing, they're not just people that were in the public eye. They're not just people. These are a lot of the stories that I've read in there so far are really from people that weren't really heard of. Yeah. They weren't really heard of. They're just, you know, people in the streets, you know, that knew that these things were happening, but they were not getting the the publicity and the accolade that they deserve, because those stories there was, you know, just like you were saying earlier, Angelina, there was a lot of stuff going on, that stories that we weren't being talked about, you know. Yeah. So what would you say is your one of the share with us what one of your favorite Black women are? Share with us one of the badass Black women in the book.
I always start with for me, Claudia Jones. I think Claudia Jones is one of my personal heroines. I think, you know, she was just an amazing woman. She was born in Trinidad and moved to people always forget that a lot of Caribbean people went to the United States. Yeah, more people from the Caribbean went to the US than they actually went to the UK. Yeah, simply because of proximity, because it was closer. And a lot of Caribbean people moved to New York, to Harlem. A lot also settled in Florida. Yeah, a lot. There's a very large American Caribbean community in Florida as well. So she moved there with her parents. She was born in 1915, and she moved there when she was about 9 years old. Her parents had gone up first to find work. And she became really politicized by a very quite a notorious case in the United States in the 1930s called the Scottsboro Nine. These were 9 African-American young men who had been accused of raping 2 white women. And they were actually, I think they would be sentenced to death, or very, very long sentences like life imprisonment of a crime they were not guilty of. And so there was a lot of people campaigning for, helping with sort of legal aid, legal costs, and finding them legal representation. But it was also just campaigning to keep their plight in the public eye. And that was something that she got involved in as a teenager. And then she became a member of the Communist Party. And she wasn't just like a member of the Communist Party. She was like a top member of the Communist Party, because she was a socialist. She was a Marxist. She very much believed in Marxist theory, especially as it related to the condition of Black people, specifically Black women. And so she wrote extensively for the Black wing, let's say the Black wing of the Communist Party of the USA. And in that period, and especially around the McCarthy when they're trying to get rid of communists after the Second World War, she found herself under a great deal of scrutiny. And they tried to start deporting her because she was born in Trinidad. So there was a sort of 5-year or 6-year battle to try and deport her, which she eventually lost. And she was imprisoned twice, and she had very delicate health. She had a heart condition. She had suffered from pneumonia as a child. So she had very, very delicate health. And despite her delicate health, she pushed on. She was so dynamic and committed, highly intelligent woman, was deported to the UK in 1955 and literally hit the ground running. She looked around and she saw this is another site of struggle. I've got to get to work here. I've got to start organizing. So she started to organize Black people, people who had settled in the UK, and were experiencing, as I said, the so-called race riots in Nottingham, in Notting Hill, in West London. Today West London is like, you can't live in West London today. The houses cost like £2-3 million. Back, this is where my father settled when he came in 1960. It was a dump. West London was an absolute dump. That's why that's the only place where Caribbean people could afford. Yeah, that's the only place they could afford those houses. But they were all run down, and they were all really in really bad condition. There's a horrible rent lord called Rackman who would rent out these houses at exorbitant rents, high rents, and wouldn't do anything to improve them. No house improvement. So people were living really very difficult. But as I said, today you couldn't move into Notting Hill unless
you can't go anywhere near it now.
Yeah. Unless you're like a millionaire, even Brixton today. And that's another place where a lot of Caribbean people settled. That's another place that's totally been gentrified. Yes. People don't remember that these were literally run down, real terribly run down areas. Similarly in Bristol, where people made Black people live in Bristol, Caribbean people in Bristol, again, they'd all been bombed out places. Wow. So this is, and Caribbean people weren't used to these types of experiences, because in the Caribbean they lived, beautiful homes. They were very house proud, very clean, and then they came here and they saw how British people lived, and they were living nice. They weren't clean people, and they were really shocked. No bathroom, you can't wash yourself indoors. It was absolute. You can ask your parents, your grandparents. They'll tell you. You don't have to listen to me. They'll tell you the story of how crazy things were when they came here. So
they had to make do.
Yeah, They did. They had to make do. Sometimes, people find it really difficult to admit how horrible it was. They couldn't write home and say, we're really suffering over here, because people thought in the Caribbean that you were doing really well here, and also you would also present that image back to them. You'd send them pictures of you in your nurse's uniform or in your bus conductor's uniform, showing you that you were doing
that.
Yeah, they're showing that you're doing really well. So a lot of people in the Caribbean thought you were doing well, but you kind of weren't, because you were faced with discrimination from at all ends. And as you well know, June, discrimination it's terrible on one's mental health. So so people haven't really, a lot of people, certainly our elders, perhaps haven't really fully sort of dealt with the impact of racism on them as they experienced it in the 1940s and 50s and 60s.
Well, there was no real language. There was no real language. There was no real understanding of what it knew, that they just weren't welcomed here. And I know from my parents' generation, it was just about keep your head down, get on with it, feed your family. There was, I mean, now we've got therapy. I mean, obviously, I'm doing the therapy thing. There's so much stuff now. This is why I always say that, we're the first generation of people that came here that have the opportunity now to do a lot of this work that our parents didn't have the resources. They didn't have therapy, didn't have, black therapists or anything back in the day when they were here doing any of that. They just didn't have that. So I think it is really powerful. I love the fact that one of the favorite people that you've put in the book, that for me personally is really nice, is you put Elaine Arnold in there. I love her work. Elaine Arnold, for those of you that don't know, she wrote an amazing book about, she's a therapist, and she still does her conferences. She does an annual conference about, I went to the one last year, it was all about attachment and stuff. It's really powerful. But her work focuses on the impact on the Black community as it relates to attachment and the impact of that. And when I talk about attachment and stuff like that, she talks about the fact Caribbean, it's very common for people to come here. They might leave their children back home, or they might leave them with another elder, a carer, or whatever. They would come over here. They might work, send money home, or eventually they would send for their children. So there's that kind of detachment, that displacement from, families were broken up, from people coming over here, trying to do the best by their families. But there is a psychological impact on that. When a child does not have that attachment, especially when the children are really young and they're growing up, there's an impact that happens when those families are broken up because of the parent immigration, the parent coming here trying to work. So Elaine's work is about understanding the impact of that. The book that she's written, I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head, but basically the book talks, if you Google it, if you Google Elaine Arnold, you'll see it will come up. But yeah, basically her book focuses on the impact of that. And she has interviews from different people in the book as well. She talks about their experiences, and she talks about, the impact of, some of the children of those people that came here. They spent, 5-10 years sometimes being disconnected from their children. And it's really, really important to understand that really is going to have an impact on our community. So the fact that a lot of us came here, or a lot of my parents came here to clean up whatever was going on in the UK. And I know my mum always said that a lot of the Black people came here, they did all the nasty jobs. It wasn't glamorous. They did a lot of the nasty jobs, that a lot of white people that lived here, they didn't want to do them. So they got the Black people to come over here and do all those jobs that they didn't really want to do. So on top of that, and having to deal with racism, they also had to deal with the fact that their children back home didn't have their parents, So that's a lot. That really, really is a lot for us to deal with. And so understanding, those things, and this is another reason why I love this book. The diversity of it, whether we're talking about Claudia Jones or Elaine Arnold, I also noticed that you've even got, you know, some LGBT people in the book as well, which I think is fabulous. Because they, you know, tell us about that. Tell us about your process around that.
Okay, so again, this is all people who were nominated, and I think that's a really great thing that Black LGBT people are visible and were nominated. So, for example, Monroe Bergdorf, you know, she's not been backward in coming forward and talking about, you know, structural racism, you know, and she lost like a contract because of it. Okay, she spoke really passionately. I think she spoke passionately about it in one of her Facebook entries, Facebook posts. And when they saw that, the company, I think it was L'Oreal, they got cold feet and they dropped her.
Yeah, I saw that.
And you know, she's all right. She's done fine. She's doing okay. But it's just like that's sort of indicative of how big corporations are very reluctant to really deal with. You know, they want her as the face of their campaign, but when she when she speaks out and she speaks honestly and speaks her own truth to power, that was a bit too much for them. And also she's very much campaigning against violence against trans women. You know, a lot of, you know, you probably read about a lot of, unfortunately, a lot of women, trans women in the United States are being murdered. And nobody really is doing a whole lot about that violence against them. And so she talks about that, and she talks about, you know, her experiences as a Black woman. And so it was important for her to be in there. And also Lady Phil, who's the founder of Pride, you know, and who also famously turned down an MBE because she doesn't want to mess with, you know, she's not down with like empire, what the legacies of empire mean for her. And she joins a really great, she's in great company with that, you know, Benjamin Zephaniah also turned down his OBEs. I don't want to do all that nonsense.
I love that.
Yeah, I mean, you know, Black Pride is really important because, you know, unfortunately, there is racism in LGBT community. You know, a lot of white gay people are really racist against, you know, black gay people. You know, I read this horrible expose about how rich white gay men were sexually exploiting Black gay men who either might be living on the streets or are poor, and a couple of them had died. You know, so these, you know, had been killed because of drug overdoses. They use they call it chemsex, I think, and they use a lot of drugs. And so, you know, but within those dynamics, a lot of those gay white men were talking about calling them slave and mandingo and stuff like that. It was absolutely horrifying to read this expose about how they view black people. These ideas haven't gone away. They haven't gone away. They still persist, and that's a really shocking thing. Not just in no doubt, not just within the gay community, but I'm sure within the heterosexual community. I'm sure there are a lot of you know, white people who have Black partners. You know, you can imagine. You know, so yeah, it was important. I know also Edward Enninful, who's the editor of
Vogue.
As well, he's in there. So, you know, I'm of the view, you know, no man, woman gets left behind. Do you know what I mean? In this struggle, we're all in it together. Nobody gets left behind. There's no, as far as I'm concerned, it's nonsense to say, yes, we're fighting for equality, but leave our gay brothers and sisters out of it, and our trans sisters out of it, and trans brothers.
I agree.
Doesn't work like that.
Agree.
We're all in it together. We're all, you know, just for me, no one gets left behind. So,
no, I hear that. I totally 100% agree. And it's that thing of, you know, I saw something today. Somebody was talking about, you know, okay, Black Lives Matter, but it's remembered to say that all Black lives matter. All Black lives, including the gay ones, including the trans ones, including, you know, so when you're saying Black Lives Matter, it's not just the heterosexual ones, it's everybody that comes under that banner. Okay, we need to be across the board, because at the end of the day, you know, why is it okay for a trans person to get murdered but not, you know, but not anybody else? You know what I mean? It's and that's really, really important. It's really, really important. And again, it's just another reason why this book is so important, because it is really, really inclusive. And again, because it is chosen by the public, there's such a broad spectrum of people that are in there, And yeah, it's just, I just love it. I just love it for so many different reasons. And I love the fact that it is, okay, it's got people like Edward Enninful in there, and then there's people like Olive Morris, which is, you know, she's kind of like a little, she's not as kind of, she's not some big celebrity. And who was the lady who was on the what's her name? Marcia Rigg. Marcia Rigg was on the.
Marcia Rigg. We had the book launch on Tuesday with Ubele Initiative, had that online, and she messaged me saying, "Can I sign her book?" And
amazing. I saw that.
I have not met her personally. She's a friend of Patrick's. But when I read into her story, and not only that, I listened to quite a few interviews, and Marcia Rigg, she was very, very conscious of not to lose the narrative of her brother. She was very, very conscious of that from the beginning, not for it to be lost, because as you know, whenever people die, Black people die in police custody, they start to criminalize that individual as if to some way to say, to justify the reason why they're dead. And she was, like, I'm not going to let that happen. And so it's been a real, so the past sort of 12, 13 years for her has been extraordinarily difficult, because she also they recently weren't able to charge the police officers that were responsible for her brother's death.
Wow.
But she's had little victories along the way, but she no longer not just campaigns for her brother, but she campaigns for all people who find themselves victims of state killings, because that's essentially what they are. And she also spoke beautifully. She was interviewed and she spoke beautifully about being honoured. So she was humbled to be on that list, and she rightfully should be there, in my view.
Yeah, it's so powerful. And just again, because it's somebody who was chosen by the public, it's almost a list of Black national treasures. That's what it is.
Yeah.
It's a list of your book is a list of Black national treasures. It's all of those people that may be in the public eye, may not be in the public eye, but these are people that really matter to the Black British public.
Yes.
And that in of itself is so important, because it's not just, these are ordinary people as well as people that have done extraordinary things. There are people that are just fighting for justice, fighting for their loved ones that have to deal with state murder and stuff like that. And that is just such a beautiful thing. Really, really such a beautiful thing.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I'd also like to say that, I want to stress, we don't have a monopoly, okay? We made a list. It is not the definitive list. I don't think you could ever write a definitive list. It's very subjective, okay? And I know that a lot of people said, why isn't this person on the list? Why isn't that person on the list? Why didn't you write about that person? What you will find is, because we did a list in 2003, a lot of the people that you often are mentioning were mentioned in 2003. Now, 2003 was 17 years ago. We also have to think about, we've discussed, this was a list that was voted by the public of 2019. So they're going to think about who they can see in their minds and in their consciousness over the past few years. So, times move on. We're not stuck in just having Black people from 2003. There's lots of people like Stormzy. Stormzy, as you know, is a highly successful recording artist, but he's also using his platform to call out injustices, racial injustice, social injustice. And he's also using his money to start like publishing houses, supporting people to go to Cambridge,
Oh yes, I saw that.
Cambridge,
I saw that.
And all other types of initiatives. Now he could easily be like just sitting on his money and saying, yeah, I'm really rich now and everything's cool, I don't have to worry. But no, he's speaking out. So I think I admire that. I admire that he is not playing the game like a lot of people say, you should be grateful to be here, shut up and play your music and do your music. No, because he has a great platform. He has a lot of fans who are going to listen to him. Black and white people listen to Stormzy. So if he says something like Grenfell, what's the deal with Grenfell? People are going to say, what is the deal with Grenfell?
Yeah.
So, you got to give that man his props,
Mhm. Yeah, and also it just become, because like you said, there are so many people that have got to certain levels in their success, and they kind of, it's almost like they forget they forget the people on the streets that help them to get where they are. So the fact that Stormzy's doing that means that he still makes him still relatable.
Yeah.
And that people will still continue to relate and support him, because he's still even though he's doing what he's doing, he's still fighting for he's still fighting for the underdog. Do you know what I
Yes.
mean?
Hmm.
Fighting for the common black person on the street.
Yeah.
He's giving them a voice and talking
Yeah.
about injustice and talking about what's important to
Yeah.
us as a community, and
Hmm.
also because it's black, because he's from here as well, talking
Yeah.
about things like Grenfell as well. It's related to us
Yeah.
in the UK, and that is really, really important. He hasn't just gone off to the States,
Yeah.
and not dogging anyone who's gone to the States to do their thing, but I think there is something to be said for these Black British giants that end up staying here and speaking on certain issues that are going on in the UK, because like we've spoken at before, a lot of it can be focused on in the US, and we kind of don't really have a voice here, and that's why. And I think that's one of the reasons why people are so quick to say, oh well, it's not really happening in the UK. There's not really racism going on in the UK. Do you know what I mean? Or there's people think there's not really a lot happening in the UK for Black people, but there was a lot happening,
Yeah.
and this book has actually helped us understand not just the history going on at a contemporary level as well, because you've got, as I said, because it was voted for by the public, there's contemporary people in there as well. So
Hmm.
yeah, and it's been really great, and I love the fact that it has captured people that, as I was saying, that are not just in the public eye, but also people that have slipped under the radar, who we might not know,
Hmm.
who we might not know. So this I thought was really beautiful about the book is the pictures. Now,
Mm.
we did speak about this. My only criticism of the book, which is actually any really small one, is the fact that I would have loved to have seen more pictures in the book. But I understand, obviously, the costs and stuff like that go up like massively with the book. But there are some pictures in there, and I love them because they're just so gorgeous. Look at that. That's Olive Morris.
No, that's Margaret Busby. Margaret Busby is
Oh, my apologies. Yes, sorry.
that's okay.
Sorry, yeah, that's
Margaret
Margaret Busby
Busby
there.
is was the youngest Black female publisher in the 60s, and she is
Amazing.
been a champion of Black literature for like 40 or 50 years, probably 50 years now. And she's edited two great books, Daughters of Africa back in 1992, and then last year she did another volume of Daughters of Africa. And
Oh,
they're all
wow.
writing by African women of African heritage from throughout the diaspora. So if you want to read some wonderful literature by black female authors, African authors from throughout the diaspora, look to her. But she's been a real powerhouse of Black literature since the 1960s. She's now actually this year she's the chair of the Booker Prize. She's the chair of the
Oh,
judges
wow.
prize. Yeah. So
That's amazing.
when you hear the Booker Prize being announced later this year or next year, she's chair of the judges. Also, another good friend of mine who's also in the book who's a judge is Olivette Ottel. She's professor of slavery at Bristol, University of Bristol. So and
Wow.
she's just come out with a great book. If you're looking for another great book called African Europeans. Um, it's a terrific book. I'm reading it at the moment. So, the book is again really about really celebrating those lots of individuals, historical and contemporary, who are really using their platform to really help
Mm,
make changes, doing things for the love of Black people.
yeah.
And in this
Mm,
time that we're in at the moment, in a moment where Black people more likely to die from COVID, everything that's happening, Black people dying in police custody, not just in the United States, but here,
mm.
a very high amount, and very few, if not any, police have been brought to account, have been held accountable for those
Mm.
deaths. structural and systemic racism, despite whatever you want to hear the government claim that it's illegal and it's nonsense. And this was coming out of the mouth of a Black woman this week, which was really upsetting to me. I was depressed for a whole day after seeing Kemi Badenoch telling us that critical race theory is illegal and should not be taught, because basically the government does not want to deal or accept that structural racism exists, and they're using a Black woman as their mouthpiece. Actually,
that's on purpose. They're doing that on purpose.
Into a tailspin, because she was embracing it like mad. Do you know what I mean? There are people like that. Was it not everybody is your skin folk is your kinfolk? Right, so just you need to be conscious of who there are people who really do believe, Black people that do believe that our lived reality is invalid. The problem lies with us. We're too much of a victim mentality, and that we should just
pull up our bootstraps and get on with it.
Get that chip off your shoulder and stop complaining. Okay, despite the wealth of evidence that demonstrates that this thing certainly does exist. So we're not in. But you know what? I spoke earlier to the London School of Economics earlier this afternoon, and I'll say to them, as long as we're living, as long as we're alive, as long as we can protest and challenge in the way that we can challenge, in our own little way, the way that you do the work that you do, June. These are little acts of resistance. They're resistance against the system. Yeah. And you don't have to do a massive thing, but even if it's you trying to live your best life or do the work on yourself to understand your own neurosis and your traumas, that is in itself an act of resistance. To even dance in the middle of your front room and have your Black joy, as you say, June, that is resistance, because people want us to be down. They want us to be down. Yeah, they want us, because it's in their interests for that type of mentality to perpetuate. And when you resist it by speaking out, no matter how, it makes a heck of a lot of difference.
Yeah, it makes a hell of a lot of difference. And I really echo what you're saying about the different acts of resistance, because people can get caught up in thinking, well, maybe I don't really want to speak out. Maybe I don't want to go on a march. Maybe I don't want to write a book or whatever. It doesn't have to be these big things.
No,
it doesn't have to be these big things. Like we've talked about, Black joy is resistance. Rest is resistance. Just making sure you get a good night's sleep. Loving on your children. Now, these are all really small things that contribute to resisting a system that wants us to hate ourselves, that wants us to hate each other. Okay, and buying this book as well is an act of resistance, because this is going to help nourish your identity. This is going to help you understand, okay, a part of history that has very much been okay, it's very much been ignored in the UK. We hear it. I remember when I was at school, the only little bit that I heard about in terms of history was we heard about Martin Luther King, and we heard about the slave trade. I didn't know nothing about any Black Britons at all in the in the UK, and so I didn't have any. There was nothing positive for me to think about. Well, what have Black people contributed? But now, this is why this generation of Black people are so blessed in many ways, and thank God for the internet. Thank God for the internet, because we're able to connect with each other in ways that we never were able to be done before. Yes, they can try and brainwash us in school. Yes, they can try and brainwash us at work to do all these things, but they can't stop our conversation. Okay, yeah, maybe they could block my Facebook page if they really want to, but we're having this conversation live. On the internet, and nobody is nobody can censor our narrative in that respect. We're having a conversation about your book, about Black Britons. Okay. The other thing, the last thing that I will share, I forgot about this one, but I absolutely love about this book is it's going to change the way that I'm doing business. Okay, this book is going to change the way I'm doing business, and the reason why and how it's going to change my business is going to be looking through the people in here that I feel inspired by, and I'm going to be incorporating them in my calendar. Okay, if you have a Black business, you also need this book, because you know, like some people will. I mean, I do it anyway. There's some dates that I have in my calendar, on the platform, and I might write a little bit about the person, and people are really interested in those things. But again, a lot of the ones that I tend to celebrate are not necessarily Black British. Okay, so this book is going to meet a massive need in my business, because the whole thing around identity, around self-love, Black, you know, loving your Blackness, all of that kind of stuff. Identity is a huge part of that, a piece of that puzzle. You know, it's not the only thing that's part of the puzzle, but it's an important part of the puzzle. So not only do we have more Black people that are doing amazing things in the community, they've done amazing, but now it's going to become part of another way that I share our melanin magic. That's sharing the beautiful things that we've done, the amazing resistance that we've had, despite all of the rubbish that we've been through and continue to get thrown at us. There's 100,
and many
there's 100 reasons to celebrate,
like nominations,
and many more.
There's so many. They're all, even if they're not in the book, that doesn't mean you're not a great Black Briton. Just that we have the brand called 100 Great Black Britons. If we'd done 1,000, my God, it would be so huge. It would be tome. You would be amazing. This is too big. But you know, I just thank you for saying that, June, because in lots of ways it is a bit like a self-help book, isn't it? Because if it's inspiring you, you know, to be you, to be your best self, because of the people who have come before you, that in my view, that can only be a good thing. Yeah, totally.
You can read the book and go, okay, well, how am I going to pass the baton? How could there's such a richness of different people doing different things, from lawyers to people doing things, you know. You can pass that. There are so many different ways that you can pass the baton. Okay, and there's 100 ways that we can do that. So yeah, if you haven't gone out and bought your copy already, you need to go to New Beacon Books. Name some of the other Black.
New Beacon Books. There's one called Black Love, Pages in Hackney. But if you want to go to the bigger stores, if you can't find it there, if they've run out of stock, then go to Blackwell's. Go to Waterstones. They're stocking it as well. Do that. I mean, you can do Amazon. Most people, if you can, if you want to, but you know, try to support the smaller independent bookshops first, if you can, please. You know, give them some of your business. If I may, I'd just like to finish with just one last badass woman, and she's not in the list. Her name, and she's still
not in the book.
She's not in the book. Her name is Althea Jones LeCointe. Now, Althea Jones LeCointe was in the 1970s, was the leader of the Black British Panthers. She came over from Trinidad to study a PhD in biochemistry at UCL, and like every person who came from the Caribbean to study to live in the UK, she was immediately struck by the level of hostility and racism that she was experiencing, not only as a student but just going about her business. So state, institutional, popular racism. She was here just after probably the late 60s, so the Rivers of Blood speech, the infamous Rivers of Blood speech by Enoch Powell. And so she became the leader with the darkest hour wasn't the leader of the Black British Panthers, it was Althea Okay, and Althea Jones LeCointe, they were, she was one of the Mangrove Nine. The Mangrove restaurant in Notting Hill was continuously raided by the police, where they believed that because they were there, it was like a community hub. They'd go there to eat and people go there to talk about stuff, and they were continuously harassed by the police. They had a protest in August of 1971, where they were all attacked. Like, I think it was like 80 people or 100 people in the protest. There was like 600 police there, right? So, and then they were charged with like incitement to riot. Althea and Darcus Howe of the Nine defended themselves. Darcus Howe was a trained barrister. As I said, Althea was a highly intelligent woman. She was a scientist, is a scientist. And they defended themselves against the barristers of the police, the state. They took on the state. And they were able to prove, because they cross-examined the police, had put all these false statements as evidence, that they were totally lying. Okay, and so they took on the state. They were found not guilty. Okay, not guilty. So they took on the state and won. Even the judge remarked that there was definite racial hatred on the side of the police before even the McPherson report, where they said that there's institutional racism within the police force, Metropolitan Police.
Yeah.
So, you know, you got to big up Sister Althea.
Man, I'm going to research her. I need to find out more about her
now. And she's a total badass woman, and she's part of the history of the Black Power movement here in Britain in the 1970s. If you understand your history, if you know your history, and nobody can take it away from you, nobody can tell you that you're nothing. When you hear about people like Althea, Olive Morris, Claudia Jones, Agri Burke, Elaine Arnold, and many others, Bernardine Evaristo, many others. These people are fighting to be seen and to be acknowledged. And there is no, I will continue in my own work to make young people know, old people know about their history. Because when you don't have a history, what did Marcus Garvey say? It's like a tree without any roots. Okay, you have nothing if you don't have your history. And the same thing that John Henry Clark, the great John Henry Clark, a great historian, history tells you what time of day it is. Okay, so and if the time is, you don't know the history, you do not know what the time is. So of course, I want you to buy the book. Please buy the book. But I'm hoping to try and devise some kind of online courses to help people learn about, you know, if you feel you don't know very much, or you don't know where to start or what to do, then, you know, I'm here. Many other people, I'm not the only one, obviously, to help you in that journey.
Wow, that would be amazing. That was just going to ask you, actually, what's next? Because I know that you're kind of being, you know, your phone's ringing off the hook. Everyone's like, come and do a talk, come. Because I know you've been doing quite a lot of press and stuff around it. But what's next? Will there be a volume 2, maybe, 100 Great Black Britons, the next 100 Great Black Britons?
Well, let's see how well this one does. And there most likely will be a one. It's doing really well. It's selling very well. I want to get my teeth into something like, I like the idea of maybe going back to what I did for my PhD, which is really looking at, I'd really like to get my teeth back into British slave owners and understand what they were really doing, where the money was going and that kind of thing. But I'll continue with my work around researching Black British history. But I think we need to know from a historical perspective, less about abolitionists and more about what these jokers were doing to try and to destroy us. So it's not difficult history to take on, and a lot of people don't want to deal with it. But if you don't understand it, you're not going to understand yourself. I think.
I agree. And I have a book, actually. I have a book called what is the name of it? Master, Tyranny and Desire. I don't know if you've heard of it.
Thomas Thistlewood.
Thomas Thistlewood.
Yeah.
OMG. Like, that book that I still haven't finished reading all of it because I cannot bring myself.
Not
I
an
have
easy
to read
read.
it like in little sections so that I can read it, I can digest it, I can understand it. And actually, one of the things that I found quite healing about that book, as horrendous as it is that my parents are from Jamaica.
Mine too.
I know that obviously chattel slavery was going on in Jamaica for I think it was 240 years or something like that. I worked out that it was going on. And we know it goes on intellectually, but reading that book, Thomas Thistlewood's book, for those of you that don't know, he was a black British, not black British, he was a white British slave owner who lived in Jamaica, I think it was 30 something years correct me if I'm
Yeah, it was about 30, 35 years.
wrong, but
yeah.
something like that. And basically he kept diaries. He kept diaries of how he would punish the slaves. He would kept diaries about how many he raped, there was just so many things in there. And just for me, just to see the names of those women, to see the names of those broken families that he broke up, to see the way that they were treated, to really get an understanding and depth of the trauma that my ancestors went through, that our ancestors went through, was just, it was profound.
Yeah.
It was painful and it was profound. And so for me, the grief that I felt just in the little snippets of bits that I wrote just gave me a deeper understanding. As a therapist, training as a therapist, it really helped me to understand why there is so much pain in Jamaica and why people that come from Jamaica, I know there's a creative thing that came out of it, there's Marcus, all of that, but the reality also is that we also need to talk about the pain, the unspoken pain, the unhealed pain about what happens to a people that are enslaved for two and a half decades. What happens? And it just helped me really understand why there were certain things in the behavior, in the way that we raise our children, the pain that I see with the people that I've worked with is very, it gives me a broader understanding as to what's going on. And I think it is really important, like you said, Angelina, conversations and to talk about it, because I think a lot of us are protecting our minds by not having that conversation because it is painful. But it's important.
Absolutely. It makes, I mean, you can't overstate the fact that Thomas Thistlewood was a sadist and a rapist. And also you also have to consider that people don't seem to remember, a couple of weeks ago there was this bit of a furore about this personal trainer who was doing these training things at
I saw that, yes,
where he was calling it 12 years a slave and you've never worked as hard as you've worked if you don't. And I got really upset about this as well. I get upset about a lot of things. It was his total ignorance and lack of understanding of what, I mean, none of us are alive today know what it's like to be an enslaved person in the Caribbean. Let's make that clear. But what I was angry about is his total ignorance, not only his ignorance, but the gym's ignorance in accepting, because they probably thought, oh, because a black man's doing it, it must be cool. Yeah,
it's okay.
We're not going to get any flack from this. But I kept thinking about Thomas Thistlewood. I kept thinking about that people don't understand is that enslaved African workers literally built those islands, and they didn't do it. They weren't paid for it. When I say built, I said they were the ones that built those plantations. They are the ones that built those irrigation systems, right? They were the ones who built the houses. They were the ones that did everything. Everything you see when you go to the Caribbean, whether it's in Jamaica, Barbados, Trinidad and Tobago, wherever, every building that is before 19, they built it. They cleared the bush, to make the plantation. White people didn't clear the bush, So if you're imagining that You've never worked as if you're going to work on this workout if you worked out like a slave. You don't understand what enslaved people did in the Caribbean. And you don't understand that people were held hostage there. They were hostages. Yeah, let's not get it twisted. They were hostages. And white people had control over every part of their being, okay, to the point they could say, I've got your kid here. If you don't do as I say, I'm selling that child. Yeah. It's not romantic. Yeah.
There's no autonomy whatsoever. None.
There's no lovely, pretty slave girl who would stroke the head of the slave master because she was in love with him. He was raping her every night. Yeah. She had no choice in the matter. Yeah. Wherever he sent her, and if she was collateral on a piece of plow, he would exchange her for it. Okay. Because she was less than an animal. She was property. Yeah. So let us, if we truly understand that, we would not pop with this nonsense. Okay. This nonsense about if you've never worked, this is going to work you like you've never worked before. Don't do stupidness like that. Okay. You have to understand your history. That not only the glorious part of ancient Egypt and of Mansa Musa in Mali, the richest man in history was a black man. Let's not get that twisted. But there's this period that totally interrupted it, and it was slavery. Okay. And if you want to understand why you do what you do, because like yesterday, my son was saying something to me, and he's like, and face was burnt like this. And I said to him, don't mark yourself. Do you remember, did your parents ever say that to you? Like if you said, oh, we had a scar like down here, and you went, don't mark yourself. Yeah. And I'm like, where did that come from? Where did that come from? So, and you know, when you use certain words like unu, and things, that's an African word, yeah? But there may be also certain customs and traditions that you do and you don't understand them. Or you don't understand why you eat yam and banana, yeah? Right. Why you eat pig's tail. Do you know things like this? There's a reason why you eat these things, right? What if you're a Caribbean person, you still eat pig's tail, right? Why do you eat yam and banana? Why do you eat ackee and saltfish? Why do you eat breadfruit? You know why you eat breadfruit? Because it was a slave food. The British went to Tahiti, and took the breadfruit from Tahiti and brought it to the Caribbean because it grew well, it was cheap, and it would feed the enslaved. Similar with yam, that came from Africa, they brought it to the Caribbean. Similar with ackee and saltfish. That you don't understand why you eat what you eat. Yeah, and especially why we have diabetes and high blood pressure. These things can be easily explained through history, for our history. I'll do a great presentation on Caribbean foods because they're all different. Everybody eats a different thing in Barbados. You eat something different and then when you talk about regions, like I didn't know some people eat ackee and butter beans. I didn't know that. You know, we were like, wow, that's regional. I think they eat up in St. Thomas. So it's just like, it's so interesting. Sorry, it's so interesting. Our history is interesting. Even within the history of enslavement, when we look at the culture, we talk about the higglers. Do you know what a higgler is? Like a higgler is the people who used to sell things in the market. Right? These are interesting things, and it's also very complex, the way we had to adapt to these societies and how we made white people dependent on us, for example, for foodstuffs, because white people didn't want to grow food on the plantation. They want in Jamaica, they wanted everything to be plantation and grow only sugar or only tobacco. They weren't thinking about food. And Caribbean people were making their own little plots of land and making food, making pepper pot soup, and they were selling it to white people because they got to the point where they actually needed us more than we need. We didn't need them at all, but they needed us, not only just for work, you know, because they made us work for nothing, but they needed us for food. You know, because we grew our own crops. They gave us a little plot of land and we grew. So there's the history while it is brutal, while it's horrific, there are also some other things in there that are also deeply interesting. Like the other day, I've been reading about Taki's rebellion in Jamaica in 1760 and 61. That started in St. Mary's. That's where my dad's from, right? My dad was from St. Mary's Parish. So I'm claiming it, man. I'm claiming Taki's rebellion. I'm claiming because my dad's from St. Mary's. St. Mary's Parish. So there are things that, you know, you got to understand that out of these horrible experiences, there is something quite beautiful that's coming out of there. And that beauty is that resilience. We're still here. And Jamaica is a very small island. Come out of Jamaica, Marley, Marcus Garvey, over here, grime, drum and bass, reggae music. Yeah, out of this small international. So take pride in deal with the horrific parts, but also you got to celebrate the victories no matter how small they are.
Yeah. And also, just as you say,
I do get very passionate. So
it reminded me of no, and I love that. I just let you kind of talk. I love that. I love that about you, and I think it's important. But what I would just say as well, and just kind of piggybacking off what you said, is that remembering that the reason why you and I are here, why the Jamaicans that came over to Britain are here, the strongest ones. We survived. We are some of the strongest lineage that survived this, and the fact that you're on this live stream, okay, talking about your book, okay. I have this platform that I've set up that Thomas Thistle didn't win.
Yeah.
Those people didn't win.
That's right.
Because we are, no matter what they've done to us, you're doing what you're doing. Okay, you're doing what you're doing as you're part of resistance. I'm doing what I'm doing as a huge part of the resistance. And it doesn't matter what white supremacy tries to do to us, we're still passing the baton.
Yeah.
A lot of us are broken. We don't know where we're going, but there's still those of us in the community that are still fighting on, and we'll continue to fight, and we'll continue to resist this, just like our ancestors did in
yeah.
We're going to continue to do it because that's in our DNA. Yes, we've been treated badly. Yes, we've had a lot of trauma. Yes, a lot of us have got stuff going on, and we need to go to therapy and all of that kind of stuff. But we're also creative. We're also passionate. We're smart. If we can do all of this stuff, and we've got traumas and stuff that we're trying to do, it just to me, it just shows what an amazing people we are, that we can go through so much pain and still write a book and still set up a platform.
Yep.
We're still doing all of these things. It's just testament to us. Thoughts, Angelina? Final thoughts. What would you like to say to any budding authors out there?
I'm very happy to be here this evening, and thank you, June, for inviting me. I really enjoy speaking with you today. I hope those of you that are here viewing or might view later, that you get something out of our discussion, and I'd like you to buy the book, and I hope that you get something out of the book, reading the book, and I hope that it encourages you or inspires you to say, oh, I want to know more about that person. They're just short biographies, but there's enough there to sort of as a jumping off point to say, I want to know more, I want to find out more, I want to understand more. So going back to the competition, so if you want to win a copy of Equiano's Daughter, and I will sign it for you, please answer the question in the direct message to June, which is, what year did Elauda Equiano die? Gustavus Bassett, of African, but his African name was Olaudah Equiano, and when did he die? Almost said it, sorry. And what was the political that he was a part of? What is the political organization that he was part of?
Amazing. So please send me a direct message with those answers and I'll arrange for you. The first person that sends me the correct answers, then obviously I'll arrange for you to get a copy of that book. So if you haven't done so already, okay, you need to get a copy of this book, 100 Great Black Britons, fabulous in business. If you want to, you know, find out all the amazing things that are going on in the UK, in history. If you've got children, I didn't even talk about that. The amazing, you know, I've been, you know, reading this for my daughter, which has been really great as well. So there were so many reasons to buy. Just go and buy it, please. Okay, just go and buy the damn book.
Buy the book. Buy the book.
Disappointed, Angelina. It's been amazing having you on. Just hearing your passion, hearing your stories, hearing your resilience, your strength in doing this. An absolute amazing inspiration. It's been really great. It's been really great, and I'm eagerly awaiting, you know, what your next step is, whether it's, you know, the next book or whatever it is. I'm excited to see what you and Patrick, if you do decide to work with Patrick again. But yeah, just really excited for you, and I'm so proud of you with this book. The book launch was amazing. It was amazing,
wasn't it?
I really enjoyed that. Yeah, it was really good. So family, thank you so much for joining.
Thank you very much. Hope you enjoyed.
Thank you. And I will see you next time. Take care, everyone. See you next time. Bye.
Bye everyone.